Well, here I am again to make some comments on ham radio. But first let me say that some of my other videos deserve far more recognition than my comments on ham radio. For example, I talked to a veteran from Iwo Jima who made an absolutely outstanding commentary. Please take a look at that video. Also, I've done some hikes up Mount Killington, Mount Abraham, and so a hike in the rain. I thought that was an outstanding video as well. But those don't get nearly the views that the ham radio ones get. So, that being said, let's talk about ham radio. Sometimes I hear ham say, "Can I have your name for the log?" Who cares about your name for the log? Does the log really come up and say, "I would like your name"? Can't a ham be a little bit more personal and say, "Hi, I'd like to know your name. What's your name?" Not, "What's your name for the log?" My daughter said to me, she heard someone calling CQDX, she said, "Well, why are they wanting to talk to someone in a foreign country? Why spend all that money to talk to someone in a foreign country? You can just pick up the phone and dial any old number. Dial a number in New Zealand or Australia, and you can talk to somebody there. Why use ham radio? Who needs ham radio? Besides, you don't say anything." She had a point. Another daughter and I, we took a trip to Alaska, and on the way back I was talking to a ham. It was about 10 miles behind me. We were on the air direct, and we were making commentary as to the scenery. And she thought the conversation was so inane, she started saying, "Well, Roger on that bush over there, and Roger on the roadkill in the road." And she thought the conversation was absolutely ridiculous. Why is it on repeaters? I will hear a ham say, "K1AAA, this is K1BBB." Then there's no response. And then that ham comes on and says, "K1BBB, nothing heard." Why does he have to come on and say there was nothing heard? Isn't that clearly obvious? Nothing was heard? On CW, hams will sometimes repeat back everything you say to kind of prove that they copied it. For example, if I say, "My age is 62, the weather is sunny, and I really enjoy hiking," they will say, "Well, fine business on your age being 62 and that you really enjoy hiking and that your rig is an Icom 756 Pro 3. Why do they have to repeat back to me exactly what I said? Hams, if I've contacted them before and didn't remember that I contacted them a couple of weeks ago, they'll say, "Thanks for meeting. It's nice to meet you again." What they really mean is, "Why are you talking to me again? I already worked you. I don't care to talk to you again. I've already talked to you." Hams, do they ever ask about you? On your next contact, when you have a contact, listen to the fact that you may tell them everything about yourself. You may tell them your hobbies, your interests, your employment. Do they ever ask about you? Do they ever care about you? You could sit there and say, "I'm dying of prostate cancer and I'll be gone in a month." And they'll say, "Well, your signal sounds good. The audio quality sounds good. And what kind of antenna are you using?" In QST, I will sometimes hear them talk about radio sport. I've never heard of radio sport. You can't have a sport. A sport is something you play, like basketball or baseball or volleyball or soccer. Ham radio, there is no sport in ham radio. You get no exercise. So, hams have made some comments on my videos that they say that what I'm saying isn't true. Well, can someone please tell me anything I've said that is not based on fact? I certainly would like to hear it. In QST, they have this thing called the op-ed page. This infers that someone may be allowed to speak an opinion that may be contrary to the ARRL's opinion. They ought to call it the Kiss Up, Kiss Ass, Brown Nose page, because anybody who writes on the op-ed page basically is approved and sanctioned by the ARRL. Now, if they let me write something on that op-ed page, now that may be saying something. But you're never going to see the likes of me write on their op-ed page. I recently found out there are a number of special event stations. How about the special event station celebrating Smokey Bear's 64th birthday? Don't want to miss that one. Special event station celebrating the first oil well. That's slick. There's a special event station that celebrates garage sales. How about this one? There's one that celebrates the highest point in Kansas. Kansas is flat. There are no high points. Well, maybe they're celebrating the big mountains in Kansas. Of course, there are no big mountains in Kansas, but Maybe the little hills that hams can climb. Maybe that's what they're celebrating. There's a special event station celebrating steam power. There's another special event station celebrating a goat cook-off. How about that one? There's a special event station that celebrates the circus train wreck that occurred in a town that was named Never Was. How about this one for racism? There's a special event station that celebrates the first white child born in Ohio. There's one that celebrates Frankenstein. Well, kind of celebrates the typical ham. How about this one? There's a special event station for NU5DE. Write that out. It basically looks like the word nude. Nude hams. They have a special event station for nude hams. That ought to be exciting to watch, especially if they're soldering and they happen to drop a drop of solder in an inappropriate spot. Woo-wee. There is this one ham, K0DXC. His name is Cal. A very interesting young man. He's interested in ham radio. His dark side is he is interested in contesting. However, he has a very large bright side. He plays sports, baseball, football, soccer, basketball, tennis, track, swimming. Obviously not the typical ham. In our local traffic net, the Cape and Islands traffic net, before they start the net, they'll say, are there any calls for the repeater? Why would there be any calls for the repeater? Who would call a repeater? No one would call a repeater. They also say when you give your call, you should say, this is followed by a carrier drop. So I went on and said, this is K10IK followed by a carrier drop. They thought I was being ridiculous. Well, you said to say your call followed by a carrier drop, but I guess they meant you should not have the carrier on. That's what they meant. Then there was this ham that was in a mall, and he was talking on his handheld. And he said to the fellow he was talking to, let me drop it. Well, they almost arrested him. They thought he was dropping his pants. And of course, I don't understand why he said let me drop it in the first place. Because the point of a repeater timing device is so that you don't talk too long. So if you drop it, you're only trying to defeat it. After the end of a traffic net, they will sometimes say, or any kind of net, they'll say returning the repeater to normal amateur use. Does that mean that the repeater was in abnormal amateur use? I have some pictures of some typical hams. I want you to take a look at them. How about this fellow? He's a little interesting. Here's another guy. I think I've heard him on 2 meters locally. Here's another ham. I wouldn't want him to drop it. This guy looks like he didn't miss a meal. Here's another ham that I would not want my daughter to date. Actually, I wouldn't want my dog to date. I heard some people give some 5'9" reports that were clearly fake. Why don't you listen?
Oh boy, you're in the mud. Give it to me again. Okay, I got Kilo Charlie 9 something. Hotel November Delta, Mobile. Thank you. You're 5'9" in Maryland?
There's this mode called AMTOR. It's not in use anymore, but it had some great error checking features. But it's not being used anymore, but a ham I was talking to had this commentary.
I really liked AMTOR mode. I always thought that was the slickest mode that ever came about. But I think the downside, a lot of guys didn't like the idea that their relays were going click clack, click clack, click clack, click clack. But the neat part of that ACNAC system, or acknowledge not acknowledge, was the fact that even if your signal went out because of QRM or propagation or whatever the case might have been, you only lost, if you know, with any stretch of the imagination, you might lose 1, possibly 2 characters out of the 10.
Here's a ham that's calling CQ, but he didn't bother to listen to his answers. Listen to this high-speed contact. A lot of real pertinent information was exchanged here. Finally, what do you call a person who keeps talking to you even if you're no longer interested? Well, that would be a ham, wouldn't it?